hello everybody. Welcome to this panel discussion. My name is Henry Samuel. Delighted to be with you today to speak for the next 45 minutes about corporate social responsibility in general, and in particular in the nuclear industry. So before we get down to the discussion, let me introduce you to our panel. So we have Philippe Nora, who is CEO of ORANO, international operator in the field of nuclear materials that delivers solutions to address present and future global energy and health challenges. We have Caroline Lemaux, who is Global Head of ESG Research, Engagement and Voting at Amundi, which is Europe's largest asset manager by assets under management and is ranked in the top 10 in the world and is, of course, committed to being a responsible financial player. And on my left here is Pierre Messulman, who is Director Risks, Audit, Security and Safety at SNCF Group. That is France's national rail operator for passenger and freight transport. And by the way, Pierre is no stranger to the nuclear industry. He was an inspector of France's Independent Nuclear Authority, ASN, and he remains an independent commission member of the Permanent Reactor Group, so he knows a few things about nuclear. So we can give them a round of applause. Thank you. We will also be joined, unfortunately they couldn't be with us in person, via a pre-recorded video link to two other people. I'm very happy to have them. Gilles Vermaux-Desroches, who is Corporate Citizenship Senior Vice President of Schneider Electric, which provides energy and automation digital solutions for efficiency and sustainability. And it is the world's #1 sustainable company, according to Corporate Knights. So looking forward to his thoughts. And also we'll be hearing from Mike Renchek, who is President and CEO of Bruce Power, and that's Canada's only private sector nuclear generator, and that'll be by a pre-recorded link. So everyone's been introduced. We're here to talk about CSR, which this is just a general view of it, is business's commitment to pursuing achievable and positive long-term goals for people and communities. It could be championing human rights, protecting the environment, alleviating poverty, and of course limiting your footprint and conserving resources locally, but also nationally and worldwide. I don't know if you agree with that definition, but first of all, Philippe, why was it important to discuss CSR today?
Thank you, Samuel, for the introduction. I really am convinced that nuclear has a lot of things to bring in terms of CSR or ESG. A number of things, not only on climate, but also, as you mentioned, on fields such as biodiversity, bringing high-level skills, and a number of UN Sustainable Development Goals are linked or can be linked with a performing nuclear industry. So that was the first idea. We bring a lot as engineers, as industry, a lot to society to make lives better, but how we do it is also an important thing for the nuclear industry. Second basic idea for the panel is not to do it alone. As we did last WNE for innovation, we are in ecosystems with financial people, with other industries. They do things on ESG. They want collaborations. They are skeptical. They are putting their ideas to us, putting their challenges to us. And I think it's really important to open our minds to this world to be more ESG oriented in the future.
Okay, well, we're going to get down to more details in a minute. Thank you for that overview. Let me now turn to you, Pierre. You're at the SNCF. What are the key challenges, first of all, at the SNCF, just generally, but more specifically, how do these relate to this idea of CSR?
Well, we share a lot of characteristics in common within nuclear industries. The first one is that we are managing long-lasting assets, which are unfortunately completely illiquid, which means when we have it, we are stuck with them. So we have a very strong responsibility because we are always building on long-term commitments, which means we are quite we are compelled to move because the environment and the society expectations did change for the last 10 years. The second point is that we have a long-lasting print in the environment. You may see old bridges or tunnels and so on. That sounds quite familiar to us nowadays, but it's still a problem, and an environment problem, specifically in old industrial facilities with ground pollutions. And the first point we have in common is, of course, a very strong focus on safety. I would say a fourth one, which is really important for this panel today, is the complexity of public debating on issues. Your industry and ours are very specific, and a lot of people do think they have an opinion, but they do not know exactly what happens. And like in the nuclear industry, the railways do have a long legacy of so-called secrecy, which is no longer sustainable nowadays, because both of the industry rely on the taxpayers' financing, because it's long-lasting assets, which should be helped by the public financing. And in retrospect, you have to be very clear and build trust with the taxpayers, which are the citizens who vote what they would like to have.
Absolutely, and I'm sure we'll go back to that point too. So I'm just going to bring in now somebody who's not here with us in the room. It's Gilles Vermeaux-Desroches. He has recorded the answers with the means at his disposal. It was very last minute, so I apologize if the quality isn't perfect. So we asked him to tell us about the key CSR challenges for Schneider, and also asked him, does CSR shape his company's priorities, and how? So let's take a look.
Yes, thank you. First, I wanted to be with you in this roundtable, but today is the Capital Market Day of Schneider Electric, and all the topics linked to sustainability are a big part of this day with our investors. I apologize. Secondly, to answer to your question, in Schneider Electric we consider that sustainability, ESG, it's more a question of value and vision than a question of regulation and standardization, even if we have to be aligned with this standardization. The way to progress on this direction is in several steps. The first step, to understand the trends. To understand the trends, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are a key frame, a grammar that we deploy and that we discuss with our stakeholders. Because we have, with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the big trends to open our mind, to understand how we have to adjust our innovation and how do we have to progress to reduce the footprint of Schneider Electric. The second thing with that was to build our purpose. We organized a big discussion with many people inside and with our partner to describe Schneider Electric and to have a clear purpose for our company. The purpose of the company is we would like to empower all to make the most of their energy and their resources for sustainability and efficiency. And we would like to be the partner of our suppliers, for example, in digitization and sustainability. With this purpose, we organize 6 long-term commitments. The first, act for a climate positive world. The second, be efficient with resources. The third, live up to our principle of trust. Create equal opportunities for everybody. Harness the power of all generations. And at the end, empower local communities. With these 6 long-term commitments, together, we build 11 goals for 2025. 11 goals, it's the flagship of our commitment. We measure each quarter. Our CEO published that in the same time that the financial results to demonstrate that is key for Schneider Electric, that is key to precise the vision, the progress and the dream of Schneider Electric. With that, with this measurement, we try to be transparent, to demonstrate what is the main questions that we would like to tackle, to be a partner of all the people who would like to consider that the challenge of sustainable development goals are the key challenge to change our company and to increase our impact. In fact, to summarize, we are a company with impact, and we try to become a company for impact, especially linked to these sustainable development goals.
So thank you very much, Gilles, who has joined us, and we'll be back for another message. But over to you before we move on to our other speakers. Philippe, after listening to Schneider, what about corporate social responsibility, or ESG, at ORANO? How does it differ from what we've heard here?
In fact, it does not differ, except when was mentioned 11 goals. We try to concentrate on 5. We're a smaller group, and maybe, maybe one day we'll have the ambition to have 11. Concentrate on 5, and these 5 are relating to our strategic axis and ESG axis. I mean, we have only one strategy addressing both ESG aspects and the business aspects. On this, we have quantitative targets, for example, on the climate, with a reduction of our scope 1 and 2, 40% between 15 and 2025, fully in line with Paris Agreement, at least well below 2 degrees, and working on scope 3. And it's also the idea of today, it's making sure that we work with our suppliers. Our scope 3 is mostly on suppliers, working with them to be more efficient. That's one dimension, is climate. We have a dimension is our impact on the community through training, through employment, through their appreciation of the risk we represent, of the waste we generate. And we want in 2025, 80% of the people around our sites to be positive about what we do, coming from a little bit more than 2/3 today, so we still have a gap. We have also quantified targets on waste, reducing the water, for example, we use, and non-nuclear material we use by 10%. It has a cash impact for us also. It's also economical, but it's also sparing resources. A goal on growth, providing solutions to our customers, especially in the domain of waste and recycling, where we want to grow to 4.5 billion. We are less than 4 billion today as a company. So that's also the key aspect. And last but not least, in fact, it's in the center of the 5 C's, the competencies. Our raison d'être, the reason why we are here, is to develop these competencies on mastering the nuclear materials and transforming them for the climate, but also for health and for a world that is sparing the resources. This is indeed the reason that was same thing as Schneider, the result of a large debate internally, externally. What do people expect from us, ORANO as a company? And there are some of the unique technologies to make sure that nuclear is in the sustainable world. And we do that for recycling. I mean, today, 10% of the electricity generated in France is done with nuclear recycled material. Soon it will be 20% of the electricity generated, and the R&D shows that we can go to 30%. So it's very, very totally included in the Sustainable Development Goal, but it also cash generation. I mean, if you are not competitive, then I mean you are not sustainable. And the last very important scenarios done by the grid in France, RTE show that a scenario where you have 50% of nuclear is 10 to 20 billion euros cheaper every year than a pure 100% renewables. Of course, we will need a lot of renewables, no way, and we will grow 3 times, 6 times. But nuclear also needs to be there to be base loaded, and it contributes both to a low carbon electricity and at the same time to the competitiveness of a system. So that's where we see our clear inclusion, same thing as Schneider, in a more sustainable world.
Thank you very much, Philippe. Now, as promised, we're going to go and hear from Mike Renchek, who I just remind you is the CEO of Bruce Power He's in Canada, and we asked Mike earlier to tell us about Bruce Power and also how it integrates CSR. Let's take a look.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Renchek. I'm President and CEO of Bruce Power. Bruce Power is an electric utility based in Ontario, Canada. So welcome to everyone from Canada. Here, we safely deliver clean, reliable, low-cost nuclear energy to Ontario, supplying 30% of the electricity supply for Ontario. But we also do something different here. We supply life-saving medical isotopes across the world. Presently, we make cobalt-60 that's used for sterilization and cancer treatments, and soon we'll be moving into other forms of cancer treatments. Also, we're running Canada's largest private sector infrastructure project, which is serving as an economic development investment here in Ontario and throughout Canada. With this opportunity, we're able to really look at how do we move forward from an environmental, sustainability, and a governance perspective. You know, at Bruce Power, one of our primary goals is to make sure that we're strengthening communities and protecting the environment. It's really part of our mission statement here at the company. Our corporate social responsibility program is set up to really help strengthen all of our communities. And we do that by helping out in our communities in various ways. We support leadership, we support investments, and we really look to drive an economic development platform that's centered around several specific focus areas for us, like health and wellness, youth and development, and community. You know, our economic development efforts here in rural Ontario have brought in 63 different companies. We've seen several 100,000 square feet of abandoned factories and vacant storefronts now be put back in use, and that's creating jobs throughout the area. And that economic drive is really helping our communities grow. We're seeing infrastructure investments in our communities that haven't happened in many, many years. We're getting new schools, we're getting new grocery stores. We've seen the creation of over 300 small businesses. More importantly, we're reaching out to all of our communities, including our Indigenous communities. We've seen a number of businesses now set up that are Indigenous owned, and we've created a couple of Indigenous businesses that really help the Saugeen Ojibwa Nation in our area. More importantly, as part of our isotopes structure where we make medical isotopes, the new isotopes that we are making have an Indigenous investment program where the Saugeen Ojibwa Nation will invest in their production, and then they'll be able to get a sustaining return on their investment over many years to come. Our key environmental, sustainability, and governance metrics and indicators fall into 4 categories that align with our core values. It's the environment, people and safety, products and services, and our community. We think through our annual sustainability report, we provide clear and relevant disclosure of these metrics, and our commitments really happen throughout the year with tangible benefits to each of these categories.
So we've heard from Mike now. I'd very much like to bring in Caroline Lemeau here, because you've been waiting patiently and listening to all of these kind of blueprints, you know, for CSR in these different companies. But obviously, as an asset manager, how does Amundi see CSR from the investor's point of view? And what trends have you observed in terms of regulation as well concerning CSR investments?
Okay, so we don't speak about CSR investments. It's more ESG, so environment, social and governance. And it has been accelerating over the last 2 years, mainly because of regulation. So you have first a soft regulation that might be very important for the nuclear industry, which is what we call labels, meaning that every country or most countries in Europe have their own labels, and more you need to have labels to be able to sell your product. And the thing is, you can imagine that if you're in Germany, they have their own view on the nuclear industry, and which provide us from investing in many of the companies exposed to the nuclear industry. So that's the first trend, because you have to remind that almost all investors are just investing for the behalf of some final beneficiaries. meaning like citizen at the end of the day. That's the first trend. So you have a big trend, which is in Europe, with all the regulations asking investors to report on their portfolios. And it's a huge trend where we need to on a yearly basis to report on our exposure to climate, to biodiversity, to many kind of social KPIs. That's the second trend. And this is linked with the green taxonomy, but it's on the top of the green taxonomy and even more powerful. And you have the European regulation, but even in Asia, you have more and more taxonomies. In China, Singapore is working on it, Hong Kong and Malaysia, and so on and so forth. Third, you have these soft regulations. There is a new trend this year now that a lot of investors, being asset owner, asset manager, even banks, they are signing alliance to become net zero. So meaning that they are not only asking you to be net zero, they are committed to be net zero themselves. So the level of pressure industrials are going to face when speaking with our investors is going to increase over time and very closely, because usually we have a target to decrease the carbon footprint of our portfolio by 2025, 2025, 2030, 2050.
Yeah. So you need to get your ducks in order, as we say in English.
Exactly.
There's no point waiting because the pressure is building. Thank you very much, Caroline. So we're going to go back now briefly to Mike again at Bruce Power and ask him why CSR matters so much. Why is it important for the business? How is sustainability impacted by CSR, and particularly for the nuclear industry? Let's have a look.
Thank you for that question. You know, in 2019, Bruce Power changed its vision and mission for the company. Our vision is to power the future, and our mission is to safely provide clean, reliable, and affordable electricity and life-saving medical isotopes to strengthen our communities, protect the environment, and secure tomorrow. You see, we take this very personal as a core part of our business. So our corporate social responsibility program is key for us, and it's really important to show how we are committed to strengthening our communities, protecting the environment, and really securing tomorrow. You know, achieving a sustainable way of life for today, but also securing it for future generations. So I would say that, you know, this is really in our DNA, and it's something that our people value day in and day out in everything that we do. You know, when we look at how our programs are set up, it's not good enough to just be profitable. We have to be profitable, but we have to do this in a manner where we can demonstrate that we are a good corporate citizen. And throughout the pandemic, our reputation has grown in this regard. We've provided roughly 2.5 million pieces of PPE to the medical community here in rural Ontario. We've supported food banks. We've supported vaccination centers. We actually had to resort at one point of working with our supply chain to be able to make sanitizers and gowns for local businesses and hospitals. It's this aspect of our business, I think, and the importance of the nuclear industry that gets overlooked at times. We do a lot from an emergency planning perspective. And it's putting this know-how to work that really helped our communities get through the pandemic. These strong relationships we have with local communities and throughout the province really help bolster how the nuclear industry gives back to day-to-day lives of people who live in the area, but also how we're creating a positive future at being a positive role model as a corporate citizen. We think our efforts to continue to grow our clean energy supply will combat climate change, but more importantly, how we are going forward to create more and different types of isotopes as cancer treatments and other forms of sterilization really will help people throughout the world. We're just excited to be able to do this. We do it because we can do it. It's something that we think we're responsible to do and to serve. And with that, we see many, many years of it into the future and a strong nuclear industry here in Ontario.
So thank you for joining us, Mike, there. So we've looked now at CSR or ESG, as you like, how it's obviously incorporated into businesses, you know, the importance from an investor's point of view. But But how can you actually use it for, as a lever for growth? It's not just about having, obviously, a good conscience and making sure that you're helping the environment. So how can you use it as a lever for growth and performance? And we've put that question, the first person to answer with it, and then we'll be really staying here in the room, is Gilles Vermeaux-Desroches from Schneider. So let's take a look at his view on that.
In 2021, Schneider Electric was recognized as the most sustainable company around the world by Corporate Knife. And in the same time, if we compare Schneider Electric to CAC 40, the performance of Schneider Electric is one of the best. First conclusion is it's possible to be very involved in sustainability and to be performant. But it's not a pride. It's something like a responsibility to go ahead and to embark our value chain and the other company in this learning expedition. Because in sustainability, each year is different than the year before. The second thing, it's very often when we are speaking about CSR and sustainability, we are speaking about reconciliation. How do we manage together profit, people, and planet? In my view, it's more a battle. The battle of how do we put in the middle of each decision the middle term, and especially each time that we have to decide something, we have to decide something, one, to reduce climate change, second, to be frugal with resources, and third, to contribute to development to the worldwide population. With these key drivers, we can build a strong strategy for the future. And when we have this strategy for the future, sure, it's a question for our company to increase our performance. We would like to be sure that the bigger Schneider Electric, it's the best planet, and we demonstrate each year that we reduce more carbon emission in the site of our clients, that our global integrated carbon footprint Scope 1, 2, and 3. Then, in conclusion, for Schneider Electric, CSR is a key element. In the same time, to organize a company and to be attractive for the new talent, we have to be innovative. And second, to change our value proposition in order to answer better to the question of our clients. For example, in US with Walmart, we are contributing to the 1 gigaton program. When Walmart would like to reduce carbon emission in their own suppliers. We are at the beginning of a new reality for the next 30 years, and because we would like to be more innovative tomorrow than yesterday, sure, we will be a great actor in sustainability.
Thank you there to Gilles. So I turn to you now, Pierre. You've heard Bruce Power and you've heard Schneider. How do you envisage using CSR as a lever for growth and performance at SNCF, which has similarities, as you said, in some ways with the nuclear industry?
I would say we are using it as a way to implement management transformation of the company. And the best way is just to listen to what the taxpayers, citizens state and what the customers state, and not exactly in the same terms. Taxpayers are very keen on environment. Customers are very keen on waste, noise, and health. Health issues are popping up in a very, very impressive way since the beginning of the COVID epidemics. And today, air quality is really a milestone for us. And my suggestion for the nuclear industry, stop speaking about on yourself about clean. Because everybody is thinking about waste, which is not exactly clean. State it about pure. You are one of the major players to improve the air purity of the planet. And okay, waste is another issue, important for you, but it's another topic. But just hold strong about air quality, because for both our workers and our customers. That's really the major social question for the next 5 years, due to what we lived every day for the last 24 months. I would say also that what the customers say is that you should improve service. And the drawback is that young people say, if you are not with a good record, we would not like to work with you. So we face, like the nuclear industry, a strong issue to be more compliant to the expectations of the younger people, just to join us, because we desperately need young talents to grow. And the proper way to attract people is just to have a very strong record on ESR. And that's really what is important in the management transformation. And I would end at the third point, when you consider to think about some issue about air quality, waste, noise, of course, you have a strong drawback, which is the cost. And the idea is to using this really new methodology to assess issues, to drive cost reductions through new ways of thinking, new way of addressing challenges, which is a way to change the way our very aging company behaves, saying we should state problem issues in another way to find new solutions and to start with issues coming from social responsibility is a very strong, because both your workers, the trade unions, and your management could not say bluntly that they do not want to be socially responsible. So they are forced to start thinking again in a new way. And I think that's the most important aspect we see in this direction.
So CSR can create a consensus that may be difficult to find under other circumstances.
It's a consensus. I would say it's a way to unbalance what used to be ideas of anybody in the company. You are forced to change your mindset to face new issues.
Because there's no choice.
Because there is no choice.
Okay, so that's a very strong driver for change. One more, we're just going to go back to Mike very briefly here and ask him on this question of public perception. How does he see Bruce Power being viewed by the public, and how does CSR impact that perception?
As I spoke earlier, we're an integral part of our community, and our community is an integral part of everything that we do. I always say the community supports Bruce Power, and Bruce Power supports the community. We view ourselves as family. You see, through our economic development programs with our life extension program, we're creating roughly 22,000 direct and indirect jobs throughout Ontario. And these are well-paying jobs that really help people establish a career, raise a family, and really strengthen the communities in all of our surrounding regions and really throughout Ontario. This creates opportunities. It creates opportunities for everybody. As we look at being able to advance visible minorities, females, and other groups, having this growth create educational opportunities for young people can really help them get engaged in our industry. We created something called the Nuclear Innovation Institute, where we're teaching artificial language programming to grades 3 through 8 and also science classes. And through the pandemic with online learning, it really developed a long way to engage students throughout our areas. Roughly, we were in 65 classrooms with over 5,000 students. Together, we can accomplish a lot. And I think that's one thing that we learned throughout the pandemic. By collaborating and working together, we can make it. And I think our corporate social responsibility program certainly understands this, certainly aligns not only with our values and our community's values, but it allows us to give back and really strengthen our communities for the future.
Thank you very much to Gilles there. Now, we're going to look more specifically at the nuclear industry's specific CSR subjects. That's why we're here today. This is the World Nuclear Event, after all. Caroline, so increasingly, as far as I understand, investment strategies are actually shaped by CSR issues such as carbon footprint, sustainability, and the environment. Greenwashing doesn't wash anymore. this has got to be the real thing, okay? Now, if we're looking at nuclear specifically, I imagine you need rock-solid guarantees on CSR if you're going to invest in it. So what are the key issues here, and how do you manage them?
Yes, we are constraining our fund manager to have, like at Amundi, we have around half our asset under management. We have a constraint to have ESG score, which is over the one of the benchmark. So it's pretty heavy constraints. What we ask for the nuclear industry first, as you can imagine, is health and safety. So it's really important. The other issue that we are facing today is more about having a better understanding on how you manage the waste. Because, you know, on the climate the climate angle, I think everybody is supportive of the fact that the nuclear industry is positive for our net zero journey. But we are what we call we need to take into account what we call principal adverse impact. Principal adverse impact. This is a regulation that we have to report on. And obviously the waste and the impact nuclear industry could have on health and safety and on waste could be a problem for us to invest. And last point I want to raise is cost. The fact that the nuclear industry is able to provide a solution for the climate at a cost which enable the emerging markets to invest is really important. You need always to have, we need to have solution like short-term solution, mid-term solution for the climate. We can't wait, and we have to invest a lot to make sure that we will be in a 1.5 trajectory. So cost and time, meaning the industry need to work on this kind of offering, low cost and fast to be on the power grids.
Thank you, Caroline. Philippe, maybe you want to react to what Caroline said about the kind of areas that she's looking into that are very important for investment. But also, I'd like you to give us a word. I know that ORANO does energy, but also there's the health side, the medical activities. So if you could tell us about those and how they contribute to CSR as well.
Yeah, on cost, I mean, certainly what you mentioned on health, on waste, and public opinion is very sensitive to the fact that we recycle. In France, 60% of the people know that we recycle in the nuclear fuel, but I would say only 60%. Certainly the waste is in perception an issue, but it has never been in contact with humans or the biosphere, so we have to communicate a lot on this, and it's very small quantities. Nevertheless, waste is waste, and we will always have a question about that and how we handle that. So that's really well known on health and safety and on waste. As regards cost and planning, just this morning, Fatih Birol, so the head of International Energy Agency, says that the industry has to bring its acts together on building on time. And for sure, there have been so much efforts in countries that build regularly, like, of course, China. They are really managing construction in a way that is on planning and on budget. Now, the question is, how do we, in the Western world, address huge infrastructure projects when we are risk adverse and where the competencies have been somehow lost along the road and need to be rebuilt? And certainly that's a challenge that here all the community that is present here at WNE is addressing it, but we need to show. We're also bringing either series effect or size effect, because as was mentioned on a number of occasions, building smaller can also reduce the risk of construction and the time of construction. And it can therefore for a range of technologies like SMRs, but also in our technologies, we build small mines, we build small enrichment modules, and therefore by building modules, we address the issue of cost and planning. And typically our enrichment technologies, but also one of our last technological development on mining, to mine small pods of 100 ton from the surface without having to dig, also comes from a way to think small, fast, and responsible, because we don't I mean, we don't either have a hole or have underground mine. We just come from the surface and dig a pit. So yes, this is changing. And then it leads to how it can shape our strategy. And I will give here 2 examples. With a liaison with what you mentioned on air quality. There are certain countries, like in the US, where there are really intensive discussion between the nuclear industry and the air quality associations. We don't have so many air quality associations, in fact, in Europe. I mean, in a surprising manner, we have it in the US quite a lot. And there are these discussions, stakeholders discussions, between the air associations really taking care of air quality. And of course, coal is emitting a lot of particles, and also cars, I mean, fossil cars are emitting. So yes, nuclear is in that debate. And it also brings, therefore, one of the 2 links, for example, that CSR brought to ORANO. When we define ourselves as clearly mastering materials, complex materials in the, for the climate, and therefore in the energy transition, but also really taking care in terms of competency of recycling. So we looked at how we can use these competencies for growth, and we tested and we made some research, and finally we now have a development project. It's only a development project, but to recycle electric car batteries. Because at the end of the day, the metals that are in the electric car batteries are rare metals. They are kind in a complex situation, and recycling them looks like recycling nuclear fuel. And this really came from how can we contribute through our ESG thinking strategically, how do we use our competencies to make just this industry better? The same reasoning historically brought us this usage of competencies to indeed the health sector. In a number of different ways. Classically, we produce isotopes, same thing as Bruce Power, but different ones for imaging, for just indicating where cancer tumors typically are in the body, with molybdenum, or also with imagery on xenon. So this will be done in an even new laboratory called LIS in the southern of France. And we do supply hospital, same thing, with more than 2,000 sources a year, so that they can really calibrate their diagnostics tools. But more importantly, the most important development is on fighting cancer itself, not only on imagery, on finding where the tumor is, but also on killing the tumor. We're just finishing a phase 1 clinical trial in the US on this, with a specific isotope that can destroy the cancer cell. We're really looking forward to enter our phase 2 trial. It's kind of disruptive medicine. We started quite a while ago, in fact, more than 10 years ago, with partnerships. First with Roche, still our partner, oncology leader in the world, but also with smaller companies like Radiomedics on this clinical trial. And we really think we can here bring something for cancer that are not treated today with the drugs that are existing, and disrupting and bringing the tools of nuclear physics. It's interesting when you discuss with these partners that are mostly biochemistry experts, and you tell them, yes, biochemistry is great. I mean, my father was a chemist, but I also had a mother that was really studying physics. And when you bring chemistry and physics together, then you can really do a lot for fighting against cancer. So looking forward to bring this. And of course, it's totally in our mission to use these nuclear materials or complex materials for climate, but also for health.
Thank you, Philippe. Caroline, when you hear all of these, for example, I know the fact that, you know, only 60% of people are aware of recycling, and all these extra strong arguments for CSR. Do you think that the nuclear industry does have the strong arguments on CSR, but also regarding the carbon footprint, and perhaps does it defend its values sufficiently, in your opinion?
I think we are way too emotional when we speak about the nuclear industry, both ways. The citizens or even the industry, and we need to focus on the facts and try to have a better level of discussion between all the stakeholders. As an investor, we think there is many things to look at, and that if the nuclear industry were to maybe communicate better, more precisely to the investor community, will probably be a good thing. You know, more and more when we are investing, we are looking at something precise, and maybe if I compare with other industry, the nuclear industry doesn't, how to say, sell its story to enough and give us enough concrete arguments and concrete assessment and figures and so on and so forth. So maybe it would be a good thing if you could a little bit more advocate your your point and give to the investor community more information about the added value of your industry.
Thank you. We're running almost out of time, but I'd like Pierre, because Caroline brings up an interesting thing. Of course, you want to know more, but the problem with nuclear industry is it's rather complicated, right? So how do you how do you square that, and how can you provide clarity?
Well, we try to. And I could say it's a full-time job. The problem is, and think about what happens with the COVID nowadays. You have a bunch of experts who speak together, and then the media translate it in a so-called easy way to understand. The problem, the communication is blurred. So basically, it's not a matter of communication, it's a matter of trust. Trust, you build it step by step. And I think that the first point is that the nuclear industry could do is to enhance and show how it changed after 3 Mile Island, after Chernobyl, after Fukushima. Because today, the political opposition jumps from these accidents because everybody agrees on the fact that it reduces the carbon prints. That's true. But a lot of people say, yes, but what happens if? So I think the crucial point is to go back to say how you innovate, how you did change after the accidents, you change the design. And of course, it's not that easy because that's quite complex, which means you need some relays, to have more education in the public, to have a set of experts supposed to be balanced-minded, able to communicate, and to have, let's say, a fruitful discussion, maybe some tough discussions, but that's just to build up trust, to be accountable, because the basic of the social responsibility is accountability towards third parties. And that's really the big problems we have is in NCF. What we say today, and our marketing people say, we are green, and the customers say, yes, you are green because you run on electricity, but that's not enough. And basically, we don't trust your process. You say you are green with KPI, okay, what about your process? So we are poised to give more clarity about our own processes to assess the proof we are compliant, and so to build up trust.
Trust is absolutely key. Thank you, Pierre. We're almost out of time, so very briefly, Philippe, perhaps you could give us some takeaway messages here on how you see what we need to...
Yeah, the first takeaway for me, it's really good to be challenged because it always brings us further down the road, and I perfectly noted the challenge on, I mean, cost and planning is also about ESG. I mean, if you are above cost and you are not reliable, you are not accountable, and that also takes part of all this. And for sure, being accountable means also giving facts that can be understood. So it's not only being facts, but it's giving the meaning behind the facts. And this nuclear has not been good enough up to now. So that's also a really interesting challenge. At the same time, I hear that we have so much together with the companies that were here today with, I mean, with Schneider, it's totally in line with what we're doing in the industry, even if we are not in the industry, but totally parallel. So we're really totally in the good ecosystem. However, we are not used to be in that ecosystem, so we need to invest more in explaining, giving facts, making sure we are coherent, of course, that what we do is really corresponding to what we are and what we want to do. And with this, I fully agree about trust. We are building that trust. We are building also the attractiveness to young people. You mentioned that. Not only to investors, but the people who we want to innovate, to bring solutions to the challenges you mentioned. So thank you very much for that challenge. And I'm pretty sure 3 years ago, we talked about innovation at a time where people in the nuclear industry were quite depressed. Now we should not be over-optimistic, but we can be if we work that ESG subject as well as we worked on innovation over these last years. I'm sure that 3 years down the road, I mean, the room that we have in the ESG scene, on the ESG scene, will be much bigger than it is today. So that's certainly a takeaway for me.
Thank you very much indeed, Philippe. We've run out of time on this panel discussion, so I'm hoping that it's clear to you that CSR or ESG, whatever you want to call it, has never been so important, not just for employees, society and the planet, but also for the health and prosperity of your own business. So it's an absolute must. Thank you very much indeed for listening in, and thank you very much indeed to today's speakers. Thank you.